Welcome back to Diving Deep with Sam Ficker. Today we have one of my good friends, but also great person who actually started the Good Human Factory, Cooper Chapman, professional surfer, now a mental health. I would say you're one of the leaders in what you do in the industry. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today, Cooper. It's good to have you.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've been excited for this chat. You've been a good friend of mine for a while. You've been on my podcast. You've helped represent the Good Human Factory yourself as an ambassador. I've loved watching your journey, not only your diving, not your social media stuff, your environment work. There's so many assets to what you're doing that I'm super inspired by. So I think we're going to have a really fun chat today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've done a lot of sustainability stuff together. We flew down to Dubbo recently to give a talk down there. But on you, the Good Human Factory, when you were motivated to start a business, start doing something outside of surfing, why something positive? Why something good? What made you jump to the Good Human Factory?
Big question to start. I don't know. I think I've always just had this feeling deep inside me somewhere that like I want to do something that gives back. I think as an athlete throughout my early 20s, I was quite selfish at times and felt like, yeah, it was almost like everybody around you when you're an athlete is trying to help you achieve your goals. And then it just didn't sit well with me, but I started to read a lot of books. I started to find myself in a bit of a lost place at times when I lost my sponsor and went through some challenging times in my career. I started to read a lot of books, and a theme that kept coming up was service, that people who are happy, that people who are fulfilled in life are doing something of service for others. And there was a book I read, I think it's by Brianna Weiss, called The Mountain Is You. And it talks, I don't even know if it's that book, but there's this concept of there's two mountains that you climb in life. The first is kind of climbing the mountain for your own success and your own pride. And a lot of people get to the top of that and go, it's not really what I thought. And then you look across and there's this bigger mountain, which is the service mountain. And I feel like I've been lucky enough to start climbing that service mountain a lot younger than I think a lot of people do. I feel like quite often people get to their late 30s, 40s and go, wait, is this all there is to life? And I feel very lucky that I found the impact that service can have on you from a pretty young age. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to try and help people throughout my life.
Yeah, I love that. And being an athlete myself, I know that feeling when you feel like you've got the whole team, the physio, your coaches, your support network, all behind you to try and go out and perform. And I feel like there is a time for that as an athlete to do your job, but also give back. And as I am still competing, I want to try and give back along the way and try to help out where I can as well. When you were surfing, what was your mindset for the high performance there?
I mean, high performance has always been something that I've loved, even from a young age. Like I remember when I was in my teen years, and I talk about this in my keynote, I was never the most talented junior athlete, but I did have a bit of success, and I think I put it down to the fact that I was curious. How can I use my mind to get ahead of the game? I was always very interested in the mental side of sport, using psychology and different tricks and tips to get ahead of the game. And yeah, from a young age, I think that was a reason why I did do quite well throughout my junior career. I picked up on that from a pretty early time. But yeah, I don't know, moving now into the rest of my life, I just feel like high performance is something everybody should look for, whether it be in their office job or whether it be trying to take care of your kids better. We should always be striving to get better, and there's so many different ways we can do that. The way I kind of look at it like is we should never be just going through life. We should always be growing through life, trying to learn new stuff, trying to meet new people, trying to expand and recognize that, hey, there's so much to learn out there that can make our lives better.
100%. I think that anyone in any field can be the best version of themselves, try to do better. What would be one of those high performance mind tricks you were using in surfing that could be useful to someone listening?
I think a big one is mindfulness. This is like, once again, I'm sure we'll talk about this throughout the chat today, the different work that I do now in my keynote speaking with the Good Human Factory. But mindfulness was something that I was exposed to from a young age, as in meditation and yoga and different things where it's about bringing yourself back to the present moment.
Who introduced you to that? Or did you find it?
I think a few different people. Weirdly enough, this just popped into my head. There's this ex-pro surfer world champion, Barton Lynch.
Yeah. And
I used to be sponsored by Hurley when I was younger, and he was one of the coaches for Hurley. And his wife was a yoga instructor, and I don't know why this came to my head. I haven't told this story to anyone ever since this.
Exclusive
but
stuff.
But I remember her talking through yoga and like talking us through these movements, and she explained that yoga isn't about the movement, it's about the breath. And I started to get fascinated by this idea of slowing your breath down and becoming more present. And don't get me wrong, I definitely didn't practice mindfulness and meditation and all the stuff that I do now back then in my late teen years, but I was exposed to it and I was curious about it. And it wasn't until I got to a stage where I felt like I really needed it later in my 20s when I ran into a couple difficult times that I realized the real benefit of it. But I was exposed to it at a young age, but didn't practice it, I guess, until more recently.
Because I noticed when you give your talks, you actually do a mindfulness section where you get people to stand up, take a breath, be in the moment. And I find it's so important to be grounded in the moment, and it's really easy to get caught out of it, especially the busier you are, the more productive you are, the more things that you're doing. So I think mindfulness is such an important skill that even I as an athlete should be doing more of. But I find most of that stuff in a high performance sport, I've had to try and learn and figure out for myself those mental edges, how to perform at your best when you need to. Aside from the mindfulness, when you're surfing, was there any other strategies you used to help you really pull it together on the day?
Oh, I think routine was a big one for me. Just trying to know, okay, I'll listen to this music before, making sure that I'm watching the conditions always before my event, making sure my equipment's dialed in. I mean, it's like any athlete. The better your preparation, the easier it is to compete. So I was always really big on making sure I was doing the right things and doing pretty similar things before every event, so it felt the same. But I don't know, I've been asked questions like this for a while. These are good questions. I haven't really thought too much about this stuff in a while now. With looking back on my surf career, it feels like a lifetime ago now, to be honest, with the stuff I'm doing now.
Because I'm competing at the moment and still training in the high performance section. I think about what I do and what other people do, and those mental edges you're talking about are a real thing. And in training, when we're chipping away, everyone's there working hard. It's about those small things that you're doing outside, like your meditation, like what you're eating, drinking well, making sure that you're on top of those small things. They really make the difference.
Another thing that I just am reflecting on now that I did at periods of my career, and I feel like those periods I was doing quite well, was a lot of reflecting. I had a diary that after every heat I would write down the scores that I got, the mistakes I made, the things I did well, and do that throughout events. So I could look back and go, where's the patterns of the mistakes I continually make so I don't keep making them? And that's something that my dad was always big on, like try not to continually make the same mistake. And he was always like, it's great to learn from your mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. So I was always very curious and watching people and analytical of different things, and always trying to review what I did and pick apart the things that went well, pick apart the things that didn't do well, and try not to repeat them.
And that is one of the best things about sport. All the lessons you learn in the water, on the platform, is transferred straight over to nearly everything else that you do. Have you found that useful when you're building up the good human factory?
Absolutely. That's kind of what it comes back to, that all the things that I talk about with the good human factory now relate back to values, to living by values. And I feel like once I was exposed and explained this idea of understanding what your values are and trying to live to them every day, it just completely opened my mind to realizing, hey, wait a second, these things are great for my performance, being more mindful, being more present, but then they're also good for my overall well-being. And that's where I've really morphed into the work that I do now, talking about gratitude, kindness, mindfulness. When we're in a happy and a healthy place, we're going to perform at a higher level too. And there were so many times in my junior career when I was your age, like you're so much more mature than I was at your age, where I was just played the victim mindset. I would always have excuses. I would always try and blame somebody else for my own downfalls, rather than looking for where was my part in this mistake, where was my part in this poor result. And I just feel like that's something that I wish I had a mindset a bit more of when I was younger, but I'm super grateful that I do now. That
sheer ownership, I feel like, is the only way. We have this joke at training. It's like, oh, it wasn't going well today. The pressure must have been off in the air. Like the air tasted a bit different. You can blame 100 different things, but really at the end of the day, especially performance, you got to look internal.
Yeah. Unless if you're blaming somebody else, it's hard to get them to change, but it's a lot easier to improve yourself. There's this great quote that I use once again in my workshops, but it's from this. It's a bit of a story. I'll tell it. It's this little metaphor about the tiger. So every day the tiger wakes up hungry and it has to hunt to survive, and every day a deer wakes up and kind of has to run away from tigers to survive. So this one day, this tiger spotted the deer, and then they both start running full speed both to survive. One to survive by eating one, and one to run away to survive. and then they're chasing each other, and then the deer takes a sharp cut to the right, and the tiger slips in the mud and misses the opportunity. The tiger doesn't go, oh, the bloody chamois didn't wash the water off me. Oh, the bloody speaker was a bit loud in my ear. No. The tiger goes home hungrier. He goes home and sharpens his claws, and he comes back the next day to the hunt with sharper claws, better than he was yesterday. And when you take upon yourself the negative things that are happening in your life, that's when you really start taking over your life and moving forward in life. So I butcher that story, but the way that
I got the message.
Yeah, but just like when you go, okay, how can I sharpen my claws? I don't want to slip in that mud again tomorrow. What can I do to make myself better, rather than come back tomorrow with excuses again?
It's really hard though when you're in the mud, things aren't going your way. It feels like you're copping loss after loss, to then look in the mirror and say, this is my fault. I need to change something. I need to do better. I need to do something different. What's gotten you through those moments when you look in the mirror and things are tough, but you know you got to change?
Oh, it's a hard one. I just feel like I did so long like that, of taking and trying to duck and weave and not take on responsibility for any downfalls. And then I just got tired of it, to be honest. I was just like, wait a second, I'm not growing when I'm being like this. I feel like as well, kind of going off this, one of the best things I've ever started to learn is when someone criticizes you, instead of trying to bite back, going, okay, where's the truth in what they're saying? And it's like, oh, there's always free ways to get better. But quite often we just let the ego get in the way of the lesson that's in the criticism that comes to most of us quite often. It's like, okay, where's the truth in what that person's saying? Okay, I can improve myself from that, rather than going like, oh no, I'm not like that, and biting. It's like, don't react to situations, respond to them and go, okay, where can I get value from this? And it's been a massive learning curve, and it continually is. I still have to check in on myself. And I think the best thing that's helped me with that is reflection. Just each day going, did I handle that situation the best way I could? How could have I handled it differently? Okay, that situation comes up again. Instead of biting, going, okay, yeah, you know what? I probably can get better than that. And it's the best way to disarm like arguments. I've found when somebody's like, oh, you dickhead, you did this to me. You go, actually, you know what? I probably could have done that better. And then it's like, oh, people are expecting you usually to fight back, so then they can fight back. But when you take the responsibility, people can't continue to argue with them. It's like, okay, yes, sorry, I'm going to try to do better next time. And it's like, it's made my life so much easier.
It's a good way to go about it. And some days it's certainly easier than others.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
When I've had good sleep, feeling good, eating well, problem comes up, no ways we'll sort it. But when I'm tired, training's going bad, things are down the tubes, it's a bit more difficult. But I find those are the days that build the resilience.
Exactly, and they're the days that you kind of go, oh, did I really show up my best today? And then that's how you start getting better at it. You go, okay, I'm not going to let my mood affect my actions. I'm going to try and stay consistent with that and stay consistent. And that's where it always comes for me back to values. Like, if I'm reacting, getting angry at something, is that me being kind? No, it's not. Not to the other person, not to myself. Is that me being grateful for the life that I'm living? Is that me being empathetic? All these values that I think are really important, the more that I check in on them and go, am I living to those values? Am I living to those values? It's just made me such a happier person.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go?
I'd love to talk about your podcast just quickly, because you actually helped me get over the line starting my podcast, which I really appreciate. And you've just built that from the ground up, grinding out. For someone that wanted to start something at the moment, what would you suggest to them?
Exactly what I suggested to you. Just start.
Okay.
If you're happy with your first episode, then you waited too long to put it out.
I like that one.
It's and as well, at the end of the day, your first episode's not gonna get that many listens, no matter who you are. I mean, unless you're yours is probably gonna get a lot.
No,
unless you got millions of subscribers.
I'm ready to grind. Follow them up.
Yeah, but the grind is the fun part. Like, I look at the podcast as, I mean, now my podcast does okay numbers, but it didn't for so long, and it's more so I didn't look at it about making money, about making followers. It was about making impact and making connections, and that's the two biggest things that I've learned, that I've done and I've achieved in my podcast. Like, my connections from it is invaluable. I'll give you an example. I mean, and you know Jahan, the TikToker.
I love Jahan.
Jahan's a legend.
We're getting him on the podcast soon.
He's a great guy. You got to get him on. He's amazing. This is just kind of going off that story. I would have never met this guy if it wasn't for having my podcast. I reached out. I'd love to have you on the podcast. Sure, mate. Great. I had some family stuff going on to do with grandparents' wills and stuff that we needed a lawyer to help out with. And I was like, oh, who do I know? And I was like, oh, I'll call Jahan.
Yeah.
Of course, mate, I'll help you out here. We'll waive the fee, blah, blah, blah. That's just because I've got a podcast, like, and I gave him the time of day to tell his story. Amazing. I've met this new person. Another one, I had Jack Doohan, an F1 driver, on recently. I've been loving the F1 recently, and I'm
Incredible.
like, how am I ever going to get to go and watch one of these bloody F1s? And I have a mutual friend with him, but I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to DM him and say, hey, would you be keen to come on the podcast? And he's like, yeah, man, absolutely. Come for a surf tomorrow morning with me and my friend Mick Schumacher. And I was like, sweet.
Nice.
So I go have a surf with him the next day. We do the podcast. We've been chatting like almost every couple of days now. We're good mates. He's like, mate, I can't wait for you to be at the F1 in Melbourne watching. And I'm like, how sick's this? So the networking element of it has just been incredible. But then as well, the impact. It doesn't matter if it impacts one person. That's what it's all about for me. I feel selfish. I just you've been on my podcast. I just love to be curious about people's stories. And when you ask people questions that have depth to them, you can really learn a lot. And I've learned so many things myself. But when you do it as a podcast, everyone else gets to listen to it and learn too. So that's the way I look at it. The money side of stuff and the growth and the numbers side of stuff, yeah, is pretty. And yeah, is obviously the goal for most people to get to. But if that's the goal at the start, you're going to fail. It should be about building a network and building, valuable content so the people that listen, even if it is a small amount, are getting something out of it.
And the people are so important. Like, one of my biggest values is people are the most important part of life. Like, you can have everything, but if you don't have good people around you to share it with, then you really don't have much at all. And I find doing podcasts, great to meet people, sit down, have a good chat, face to face.
Yeah.
I can't do Zoom. I'm terrible with Zoom.
Zoom's hard. Until you start getting international guests,
Yeah.
try and do them all in person.
But yeah, the people are incredibly important, and you never know when you could help your mate out in one of those situations. Or Jahan's even helped me with a contract. Like, my man Jahan's just helping everyone out.
But it's so cool. Like you said, it's very rare in society that you sit down face to face with someone for 60, 90 minutes without a phone, without distractions. It's like almost never. Podcasting is the one thing that I feel an absolute privilege. I've had 130 guests on, or more than that, in the past 2.5 years. Like, that's 130 long conversations. That's like, almost a week dead straight of every hour of the week. I've got to sit there and talk to someone and give someone the space to share their story, because it's a skill, and I feel like I've gotten so much better at it. And if I hadn't had my podcast, I wouldn't be as good at maybe public speaking as I am, because I feel like you learn through action. And I've just been so fortunate to have so many incredible people on the podcast now, and hopefully continue to grow it.
That's something I've really enjoyed about, like, that undistracted chat with someone, to be curious, that space to ask questions, to see how someone ticks, how they operate. And that's part of what motivated me to start the podcast, to understand people better and what makes them work.
And that's the thing, even if you're like someone sitting there listening now going, oh, no one's going to listen to my podcast, literally just put a recorder between you and your best mate and go, I want to get to know your story a bit. I'll give you an example. I had one of my really close friends, his name's Ned, on my podcast. He's a really big fashion photographer, absolute legend, but we've only been friends for the last 4 or 5 years. And my podcast is quite unique. I always do a chronological of the person's life, talk about their upbringing, their school, what they thought school was going to be like, and then we move on to what they're doing now in their career and whatnot. And I interviewed one of my best friends, and he told me that he was like national pole vault champion in school. And I was like, what the fuck? I was just like, are you kidding? Like, you would never have known that. And he was one of my best mates. And then he's like, and then I went to America and I worked at Camp America. Like, and that's how I got into photography. They just had a camera lying around. They said, does anyone know how to shoot photos of the camp? And that's how I got into the photography. And now I still go back to America for 2 months a year. And I didn't even know that my mate goes there for 2 months a year. I just thought he was over shooting stuff. But no, he's working for Camp America. I'm like, how's the things that you don't know about the people closest to you just because we don't ask them the questions? So podcast is great for that.
I've been loving it, and just giving someone the space to open up, be vulnerable, even share their perspectives. One thing I've heard you talk about before, getting your value tied up in sport, and when things don't go your way, being a bit down, that is a constant battle. And as an athlete, something that I feel like I've never overcome, but something I'm always trying to be better at. What's your experience been like in there?
Oh, it's hard. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you don't care enough, you're obviously not going to win. So it's a fine line of balancing this really caring, but then not really caring, which I found it very difficult to do, especially in my younger years, in my late teens, my early 20s. I was so entrenched in external validation. When I'd do well in my surf comp, people would pat you on the back. You'd feel really good. Everyone wants to be your mate. And then you'd start doing poorly in comps and
the attention's taken away.
The attention's taken away, and you start telling yourself stories in your head that you're not a good person because of it. You're not the same person you were back then. And then I've learned some great lessons along the way, and I got taught these many times when I was your age in my early 20s, but it just needs to click at the right time. I think sometimes, like I said, I just got tired of feeling like the world was against me, and I kept like doing well in comps and I'd feel good, and then poorly, and I couldn't really work it out. And then I spoke to my sports psychologist, and we're kind of just going through a few different things, and we got to this point where it's like, mate, you're just basing so much of your self-worth, your identity on Cooper the pro surfer. But pro surfing's what you do, but it's not who you are. Like, who's Cooper Chapman? And I was like, it was the first time that someone had ever really asked me that, because I'd grown up from 9 years, 10 years old, a sponsored surfer at the top of the country throughout my teen years. Like, that was who I was in my mind. And I didn't know who I was outside of that. And that was when, he said to me, like, all right, that's what you do. It's not who you are. And then he said, what are your values? And I was like, I don't really know. And he's like, come on, like, what are your values?
How old were you at this stage?
I would have been like 21, 22.
About my age.
Yeah, kind of. And I was just like, I don't really know. Where do I find them? And he's like, I mean, do you read? And I was like, not really. And he's like, I want you to start reading some other people's books, some different sports stars. The first one I read was Open by Andre Agassi. Fascinating. I don't care too much about tennis, but that book was phenomenal because it goes on to talk about that he hated tennis. His dad pushed him into it. He was into drugs and alcohol and all this really gnarly stuff, and he hated it. And then in his mid-20s, he created a school for disadvantaged kids in Las Vegas, and he started to donate all his prize money to that, and he loved playing tennis again at the end of his career. He started to actually enjoy his life again, and that's what I got out of the book. For me, it felt like, he learned his values. He learned, there's more to life than just trying to win competitions, being pissed off at my dad that he pushed me into tennis. There's, okay, I can make a choice each day. Do I want to wake up and think the world's against me, or can I wake up and go, okay, what can I do to make the world a better place? And then I started to, understand, okay, so what are my values? And how do you find your values? You just look for people that you're inspired by. Look for people who you look up to and try and emulate the best parts of them. So for me, the 5 values that I'm really big on now is, first one's responsibility. Like we've spoken about a little bit on this podcast. I think it's the first step for anyone to improve is being able to take responsibility. I think step 1's awareness that you need to take responsibility, and step 2 is action. I always say to people, knowledge is knowing, wisdom is doing.
Got to have a crack.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything, right?
We all know a lot of really good things that we should be doing for our health, whether it be sleeping enough, eating nutritious food, getting sunlight, getting exercise. We all know all these things, but are you actually doing it? And I say that as just an accountability, like little quote at the back of my head every day. Knowledge is knowing, wisdom is doing. I don't want to do that, but I have to. I should do it.
Could, should, don't.
Exactly. So that's step 1 for me is responsibility. The second thing I always talk about is gratitude. Once I got exposed to gratitude, I was like, you can either live thinking the world's against you or thinking the world's for you. And I started to, really learn about gratitude and understand, like, okay, do I want to look through the positive lens or the negative lens? That was the way that I started to look at it and started going, okay, I can either be disappointed that I'm not here, or I can be happy that I'm here. And I'll give you an example of this. I just lost my sponsor for surfing. I was getting paid like 50 grand a year to surf, which is basically exactly how much it cost me to travel. I didn't have to worry about money to do my career. And then I got dropped when I was like 23. I just had my best year ever. I was like 45th in the world for surfing, but I got told by my sponsor, sorry, we don't think you're going to get into the top 30, which is where we need you to be. See you later.
So you had the best year?
Had the best year I'd ever had.
Everything was going your way? And you got dropped.
Close to almost going my way. I was very close to getting to where I really wanted to be, but I was still the best I'd ever been. And then they're like, all right, you got to go. So for then 2 or 3 years, this is like 22 to 20 or 23 to 25 maybe, I started to think, the world's against me. There's all these other surfers who are ranked way lower than me that are getting paid way more than me. Like, fuck this is shit. Sorry if I can't swear on your podcast.
No, it's fine.
You can edit
we want you to be you.
And I was just like, the world was against me. And I was like working full time as a tradie, 50 hours a week. And then I'd spend that money to go to the next event. I'd be at the event going, like, I can't believe that guy's getting paid. And then I remember one day I was sitting on the beach in South Africa getting ready to paddle out for a big heat. And I was sitting there like with this shitty mindset. And I was like, wait a second. I can either be disappointed and resentful towards the fact that I'm not getting this, or I can sit here and go, how good is this? All of my mates that I work with full time are still at home right now, and I'm sitting here in South Africa about to go and surf and compete. Like, this is amazing. So it was about perception and starting to go, okay, so often we compare across and up, whereas it's not about comparing across and down, but it's about going, okay, well, there is some good things going on in my life.
Perspective.
Yeah, perspective. So I just started going like, you know what? I'm going to, instead of traveling the world the last 2 years of my career, like going, I wish I was getting paid more, I was like, how lucky am I that I get to do this? And we can all do that in different parts of our life. If you're lucky enough to be listening to this podcast right now through an audio device and an iPhone or whatever, in a car or sitting somewhere comfortable and safe, you're doing better off than so many people. And that's what gratitude's about, just focusing our thoughts and energy on what we do have rather than what we don't have. I'm sorry, I'm taking a very long time to get through these 5 values. Okay, you got questions?
No, I was just going to say, when you change the way you look at something, like the things you look at change. And I've found in my training, say I was struggling with my reverse 2.5, I come in every day, I stand in the same position and I face the same issue. It's going short. Instead of getting super angry and annoyed about it, back to the drawing board, sharpen the claws, think, how can I make it better? What else can I be doing? It's more basics, more this, more that. And then going back up and having a crack, but finding yourself in the same position but differently prepared and having a completely different result, and just changing the way you look at it can completely change the outcome for you.
Absolutely. But yeah, I'll go through the last 3 values just because these are my kind of the bread and butter that I talk about quite a bit. But the third one that I really like is empathy. I think empathy is a trait that we all need to have. And I look at empathy through the lens of just getting better at listening, getting better at respecting others' feelings and emotions, and just getting better at judgment, not judging people, going like, I don't really know what they're going through. If you think about every day that you've gone through and the challenges that you've had to deal with in your life, every time I walk past anyone now, I go, wow, that person's had to go through just as much, if not more, themselves as well. So I can't judge the way they're acting right now. Who knows what they're going through? And then like a big one with empathy is listening. It's something that I struggle with quite a bit, but there's a quote that helps me a lot with it, and it goes, listen, don't just wait to talk. And it's been so important with podcasting, because quite often you'll see a podcaster write questions down and they'll ask you a question and they're not actually listening to what you're saying. They're just waiting to ask the next question, and then it's an average podcast because it doesn't have any flow. It's not a conversation, it's an interview. And a lot of us are just waiting for our chance to speak without actually listening and going, wow, I'm really curious, and going, putting yourself in that person's shoes and going like, wow, they're really excited about that thing they did today. Maybe I'll try and put myself in how that feels, rather than just go, oh yeah, that's great, good on you. It's like, actually put yourself there. So that's empathy for me. Next one's mindfulness. We spoke about it already a bit in this podcast, but yeah, just taking time each day to be present. And then the last one's kindness. I just wish we got explained in the media, at school, the power of kindness, that kinder people are happier people. It's releasing the happiness chemicals in our mind, serotonin, oxytocin, when we do kind things for others. And I think most of us know that feeling, that it feels good when we do something nice for someone else, but when you do it actively, it's a beautiful thing. And I break, once again, kindness into 3 categories: being kind to yourself, and that's just always being curious. What things can I do that can make me healthier, whether it be learning how to breathe correctly through your nose,
what's
to your
something
belly.
you've been doing recently? Kind to
For
yourself.
me, being kind to myself.
Yeah. Run us through all 3 and something you've done recently.
Okay, so being kind to myself, a big one that I have this thing at the moment at home. Me and my girlfriend have a whiteboard that says full potential, and we have 14 tasks, and then the 7 days of the week written out. So 14 times by 7 is 101. So basically we have out of 100, how well we do for the week, and we have 14 habits. I'm going to butcher them all, but these are all different habits that are being kind to ourselves each day that we know make us reach our full potential. So on the board we have breath work, meditation, stretching, taking our supplements, what else, communicating as a couple, doing some work, what else do we have on there? 30 minutes of exercise, getting in nature, just all of these like simple like habits that we have, like no phone before and after 7 a.m, 7 p.m.
Do you go no phone after 7 p.m?
Yeah, I try to. These are all things that if I get 101, I've reached my full potential for the week. The best I've done in 6 weeks of doing it is like 68.
Yeah.
So I know I'm never going to get 100, but it's about, okay, keeping accountable to these things that are being kind to myself. So one of the main ones that I do every morning before I check my phone before I get out of bed is breath work. I just do 20 minutes of breath work. I know it's good for me. Bang, there's a way to be kind to myself. Being kind to others is another big one. And it's funny, being kind to others, it works in two ways. There's obviously smiling at strangers when someone, you go and buy a coffee, like looking them in the eyes and going, thank you so much. I hope you have a really nice day. Watch how much that impacts someone, because it's rare now to look at someone in their eyes and actually genuinely mean it. So that's an easy way to be kind to others. But then as well, receiving kindness is something that we all need to get better at. For 70% of us, when somebody offers us a gift or a compliment, we do this weird little, oh, I don't deserve that. Do you feel like that when people give you a gift or a compliment?
I try to just say thank you.
But sometimes it's hard,
and
right?
move on. Sometimes if you feel like...
undeserving.
Yes.
Yes. It is difficult. But when you do that whole weird, oh, no, like when someone's like, here, I got the next beer, and you're like, no, I'll get it. When you do that, that's actually blocking them a chance to do something that's kind, that makes them feel good. So when we do this whole weird,
I've just been doing the boys solids and they don't know it, you know?
But that's the thing. So just learning to accept compliments has been a big one for me as well, because that's just helping spread more kindness. And then the third thing is being kind to the environment. Like I used to pick up rubbish and almost do it to, once again, external validation. Younger Cooper's a lot different to Cooper now. I'd pick it up and look around. Did anyone see me do it? Now I pick up rubbish. It makes me feel really good to know that I'm trying to clean the planet up. So by throwing rubbish in the bin, it makes me feel good. So there's 5 values that I've kind of started to work on. They're always evolving. I'm going to continually add ones, take ones out, and it's all just about the chapters in your life, which ones are important to you at that time.
When you started living by your values, how did your life change?
I was far less swayed by people's opinions. If someone didn't like me or didn't agree with something that I was doing, I was like, well, I've decided that these values are important to me, and if I'm not living to them, then that's on me. But if I'm living to them and people don't agree with it, that's fine. So I feel like I've just gotten a lot more sure of myself, of not taking on criticism as bad. And I think that comes back to, once again, the empathy thing I was talking about, of receiving criticism. When somebody says something criticizing to me, by having...
We're talking about constructive criticism, or
Exactly.
someone's having a crack?
Okay, we're talking constructive. We're talking... But
Okay.
sometimes people having a crack can be constructive without you realizing. If they're thinking it for a reason, then they're saying it for a certain reason. So I was like, where's the truth in what they're saying? And if someone's having a real crack, I just have empathy for them. I'm like, what is that person going through? And it's like, I can either get reactive to everything, or I can just be like, you know what, I'm not gonna let that person's energy ruin my day. But yeah, I think the more I've matured, the more, by living to these values, it's just given me like a solid baseline to come back to. I don't feel like I'm like lost, like who am I? It's like, nope, you're your values. Live to them every day, and your mental health, your well-being will take care of itself. Good things will fall around you when you're each day trying to live to those values.
I've had a slightly different approach. I've never actually written down my values, although I do think it would be a very value step. But I've always found having a goal is what's kept me pretty centered. And like you were saying, when someone gives you that hate, or we'll call it constructive feedback, that you do take on board what you can. And I've always found I listen to the people I trust that are around me. Like if you come over and we're like, hey Sam, like maybe you should think about how you're doing this, or reconsider how this could look. I take it on board because I trust you, you know me. But if there's, especially with social media these days,
You've got to earn the right to give advice.
Yeah, you know how it is. Old mate Stephen reckons he knows. You know, you take that with a grain of salt. And I've always found that to keep me quiet, centered, and directed. So I feel like there's a few different ways to go about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when things did start rolling on and you started feeling better, is that when the Good Human Factory started?
Kind of. I started to develop these values. I started to... I'll give you the story, really. So I lost my sponsor. I was like working full-time as a tradie. How else can I make a bit of money?
What trade, by the way?
I did like landscaping for 8 months to a year for a friend of mine. And then I did building, or like carpentry. I was like a trade, a family friend just sort of like brought me on the work site for a year and a half to like be a labourer, but he kind of taught me how to use the tools and do everything. So I really enjoyed it, to be honest. It was something that I could see maybe my future going down, because I like to use my hands, I like to build stuff. It was fun, but
I'm similar. I like.
Yeah, it was enjoyable, but I started to get like, is this really me? Am I going to be this old grumpy guy on a work site? So I was like, what else? And I was like, okay, maybe I can run some surf camps for young kids on the northern beaches, and that can create a bit of an income. So I ran these 2 surf camps, and during the camps, I did like surfing, skating, nutrition, board design. But one of the things that I talked about was mindfulness. I did a visualization exercise with all the kids. And after the training camps, a few of the parents came up to me and said, oh, the kids were really raving about the visualization. They loved it. Never any intention thinking I was going to go and talk about it. And then something happened. My younger sister lost 2 friends to suicide in a fortnight in her last year of school.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, tough. Like, at the time, I mean, they weren't like her good friends, but just 2 guys in her year took their own life. There's reasons why. But anyway, I was just like, are you kidding? There's these kids in my local area that are that sad and upset and don't have the capacity to deal with what's going on in life, that they're doing the unthinkable. And I remember I was sitting around the dinner table and I could see my dad like quite visibly recognizing that I was quite pissed off almost by this. So I started looking up some of the stats and I was like, holy shit, mental illness is like this really big thing. And I'd had some family history. Like, I lost an uncle when I was a kid to suicide. I watched my dad go through a few different mental health challenges himself throughout my teen years with like alcoholism, depression, anxiety. Nothing super bad, but I was always aware mental health and mental illness is a thing. And that was kind of the reason why I was very forward thinking when it came to finding these values, asking my sports psych, oh, how can I improve? Because I was always very fearful. Maybe I'm going to fall down this family history of mental illness. My mum would kind of unbeknowingly joke about like, oh, it runs in the family, blah, 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 like you better be careful. So I was always fearful. And I was fearful, but I was also felt guilty that I couldn't go and ask a psychologist or complain about my problems because I'm a pro surfer. I'm living a beautiful life. Why can I complain about my life? So I was kind
even
of...
some of the most elite athletes, most successful
mental
people,
health doesn't discriminate. I've learned that since I'm older, and hopefully anyone listening can know that too. It doesn't matter if you're the most successful person in the world, you can have mental health challenges, it's fine. So anyway, my sister lost those 2 friends. I was like, what can I do about this? And my dad's like, oh, remember the kids all said they liked the mindfulness. Maybe you could go and speak to the kids at the local school that I went to, Narrabeen Sports High. Maybe you can help 1 or 2 kids to pick up a skill. All right, sweet. So I call my old school teacher. His name's Woody, legend. I got to catch up with him soon, actually. Tell him my idea. Hey, can I maybe come and speak to the kids? And he's like, let's go have a beer at the Colorado and have a chat. Sweet. So we go and have a beer. Tell him like, oh, did you hear about the kids at the other school? He's like, yeah, how dreadful is that? And I was like, can I maybe like come and talk to some of the kids at Narrabeen about my journey, some of the skills I've learnt, and maybe it can help some of them. And it was like right before the end of school, and I was about to go to Hawaii. I think it was in 2018.
Dude, Hawaii's a beautiful place.
It's so good. And he's like, go and create a presentation, come back, term 1, you can present it to the kids. Great. So I go and do that. I present it to the kids. It was so bad. Actually, part of that story, when we're having beers,
Is that your first public talk?
Yeah. I'd never done public speaking in a training, nothing.
When you say it was how bad,
it was terrible.
What happened? What were you feeling?
It was just like looking back at the screen and kind of reading off the screen and then kind of looking at the kids and then not really knowing what I was doing, and like it was done on like PowerPoint with like clip art and shit. It was terrible. But the funny thing is that's where the name actually came from. So Woody, when we're having beers that first day, he's like, you're such a good human for wanting to do this. And he's like, what would you want to call it? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, why don't you call it like the Good Human Factory? They come to the factory and they leave a bit better. And I was like, yeah, sweet. So that's where the name came from.
It's stuck.
Yeah, it's stuck.
Thanks,
anyway.
Woody.
Yeah, once he said it, I was like, oh, how can I make the logo? And because my name's Cooper, I've got double O in it, I always sign my signature a smiley under the OO. So then when it was like the Good Human Factory, I was like, oh, good, I'll make it a smiley. And then I was like, oh, let's make the good. I've got
some of these socks.
Yeah, the good smiley socks. They're so good. They're
the inside
they're the most comfy socks. Anyway, sorry, this is a really long part of the story, but so I come back, I talk to him about my workshop. At the time, I'm still surfing like full time, and I'm working 50 hours a week as a tradie. So for the first 2 years, it was nothing. It was like one workshop, a name of a thing, no business. I hadn't like charged anyone. If I like looking back, I wish I just did way more for free. I wish I just went and got more runs.
How many did you do for free?
At the start, like probably only like a couple.
Okay.
Because at the start, I was only trying to charge like $300, which looking back, it's really hard to get paid really little because it's like you don't have any credibility. It's like, do we want to go pay someone $2,000 or $300? Probably the guy that's $2,000.
Yeah.
Anyway,
are you better off just doing them for free until you can charge the big bucks?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully you guys are going to start speaking for the Good Human Factory, and I'm going to charge you guys out at a premium fee because I trust that you guys all have a good story. I'm keen to jump into that though.
Like the public speaking is something I'd like to get more into. And that's why I find this journey so interesting, because anyone who's either done a public talk or they find it terrifying, and they've done one and it hasn't gone great, or might have been similar to your experience. After your first one, how are you feeling, and why did you continue if you didn't feel like it was good?
Oh, that's a hard feeling. I think just because at the end of the day, the why has been so strong. If one person in each workshop leaves with one little thing that might improve their day for 5 minutes, then I feel like I've done my job. So my expectations have always been so low when I go into a room and speak to people. I know I'm never going to change every person in the room. You go in to speak to a room of 100 people, there's not a single topic that you can engage every single person. And then you throw in the fact that my topic is mental health, you lose a bunch of the room again. So I've never really put too much pressure on myself, because my why has always been like, you know what, I just want to help people. If a bunch of people laugh me off the stage because they don't think it's good, whatever. I know that I'm just out here trying to help them. So if that's the way it goes, then that's the way it goes, which is a hard mindset because people are obviously so fearful of public speaking. But my fear of public speaking was so outweighed by the importance of the story that I was getting to share. And back then my keynote was terrible compared to what it is now. It had no structure, it had no flow, but I just started and I started to get feedback. That's something that I'm going to talk to you about, and maybe this is a good thing to talk to people. If you are looking to get into public speaking, this is something I wish I did earlier in my speaking, is get feedback from every workshop. Now, whenever I do a workshop, I have gratitude cards. On every card, it has a QR code. People scan the QR. I ask them at the end. It goes to a feedback form. I get like a little quick bit of data, but it shows me how'd you feel before, how'd you feel after. And after 30,000 people, the average is it goes from 5.8 feeling out of 10 to leaving my workshop is at 8.3. So it's 25% direct improvement. And that's helped so much with the imposter syndrome of who am I to go and speak to these people? Is what I'm doing actually working? The numbers don't lie. The data is such a beautiful way, and you ask for feedback, you ask for testimonials, and then you start to go, okay, they said it was too long, it was a bit boring, more activities. And that's how I've tweaked everything, is just by constantly refining and constantly taking feedback and not getting butthurt by the feedback. Going, okay, where's the truth?
By the values, it's protecting you.
Well, it's very hard when you get one person go, oh my God, I love the podcast clips in it, to the next person going, I hated the podcast clips. And it's like, well, who's right? So you kind of learn how to sift through the feedback. Yeah, that's been my journey with speaking. I've just always been so passionate, and it is a lot easier when my keynote is my story. I tell my story, so it's a lot easier to tell your story than trying talking about a topic that you don't really know to give a presentation on. So it's a bit different to like the old school presentation on To Kill a Mockingbird, where you're like, oh, I forgot to study. Like,
not only do I not particularly interested in the book,
exactly,
I'm not great at reading.
Exactly. So when you're telling your own story, it's a lot easier.
I always found in school the presentations I sometimes struggled with, and I thought that I was just bad at public speaking and wasn't very good at talking in front of people. But it was because that particular structure, and everything works for people differently, of having a super rigid line for line. Like, I remember one assignment we had to submit what we were going to say and then go and say it. I was like, it's like the Achilles heel for me. I'm good at just doing my research and then presenting and talking and speaking from my own understanding, not what I've written down. And I thought that there wasn't a place for that when I was in school, because that wasn't the measure of success within the field.
And that's the thing. Thinking back to school, like, public speaking at school is so different to giving a speech. Public speaking at school is like write palm cards and like try and look down and look up. Like, I've never given a speech with a palm. Maybe I did do palm cards my first workshops. No, I don't think I did.
I found it really hard to read off.
It's really hard to read off palm cards, but it's just like knowing your content and doing it over and over. And now, like, I've presented the same keynote close to 200 times, so it's like I could get up and
tell us about your reach. You've now grown the Good Human Factory talks. How many people have heard the speech?
Oh, I need to get better with like my analytics and data, but approximately 40,000 students with like 85 schools over the past 3 years, which is pretty cool. It's been quite difficult to build the reputation at schools, to build the credibility, to get your foot in the door, because obviously you're walking through school gates, you have to have working with children check, you have to have a bit of trust. And yeah, that's taken me years to really build the reputation and get some consistent bookings, which has been great. And then with corporates, I've probably done close to 10,000 corporates, but it's been cool. The last year I've done like Apple, Telstra, Amazon, McDonald's, Red Bull. So to get to work with companies like that, and then other companies like Collier's Engineering, and just the beautiful thing about what I do is mental health is everybody. there's not a single
Doesn't discriminate.
industry that can't have me come in and speak. So it's a good place to be in. But I love that the way that I talk about mental health is a bit different. The whole mental health industry is based around mental illness, but I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to show, hey, mental illness is something that 20% of us have. Mental health is something 100% of us have. And you see most people when you go into a room and go, hey, I'm here to talk about mental health today. You see 80% of them go, that's not for me. I don't have mental illness. But it's like, no, you have mental health. I'm here to take you from a 6 to a 9. I'm here to take you from a 4 to an 8. And hey, if you've got a mental illness and you're down at a 1 or 2, maybe I can bring you from a 2 to a 4. It's about always trying to get better. Like, I take the feedback. Very rarely do people say I'm a 10 at the start. So it's like, okay, how do we open our mind when somebody comes to share some stories with us and maybe try and pull out of it?
Even someone that has known you for a while, the first time I heard your speech, I even took a lot of value from that and learnt from it. And as a elite athlete, a lot of the psychology stuff isn't necessarily taught to us as well. We've had to learn, well, personally, I feel like I've had to learn a lot of my own mental strategies, mental tips on my own and take those away. So it was interesting hearing yours and your story and what you've used and how that can apply to anyone.
Yeah, well, I've been like I've read a lot of books. Like I said earlier, I've had a sports psychologist bits and pieces throughout.
Where was your sports psych? Was that through
Surfing Australia?
The Surfing Australia. Yeah.
So we had like a Surfing Australia in-house sports psych, Jason Patchell. He's great. He's been on my podcast actually. You should listen to the episode. It's really interesting. He talks a lot about the value stuff. That's where I learned all of that. But yeah, I've learned from him, and then like Ben Crow came and spoke at an Olympics surfing training camp that I got a lot of really cool lessons from. But yeah, it's just like curiosity. I've just always been fascinated by like, hey, we can completely change our life by just thinking stuff differently and learning stuff. So I've just always had this curiosity to continually learn and find out different things and not think that I know everything. Like, there's nothing worse than having a closed mind, I don't think.
Yeah, and even just being able to change the way you view something, having that actual effect and seeing that come into play. Like when things like your talking started to roll and you started to gain Macca's and Amazon, these big deals started coming in, how did that feel for you? Did it feel like you were just plucking along doing your day-to-day thing but you were doing bigger things, or was it like, oh, like I've really made it now? What was it like going from the talk where you felt like you had no idea to these big corporation talks?
I mean, I definitely don't feel like I'm like anywhere close to where I want to be. Like, I'm not in a I'm not in a bad position, but like financially, like the business could be in a place where it's, making me, not that it's about making money, but in a place that I'm not stressed about rent and whatnot, which is getting there. Definitely like getting those big companies to take on my work and have me in to speak to their employees has been just great, I guess, for the credibility, but also for me to know that, hey, my story is something that people are getting something out of. Like, a big thing's been imposter syndrome, but obviously booking more big clients and having the trust for them, for you to come in and speak to them, and then once again taking the data and getting the feedback and going, okay, it's actually making an impact. It's been really cool. But I mean, I still pinch myself, like getting up on stage. I don't really get nervous anymore. It's so weird. I look at it like now it's like almost a performance. Like, I get up on stage and it's like almost a
high performance.
Yeah, high performance. I get up on stage and it's like, I look at it like Fisher when he goes and DJs. My brother-in-law, it's like you get up and you're playing a role. You're a performer. And that's what a speaker is. It's like you're getting up and you're performing, because like the way I speak in my talks is quite different to how I'd speak in a conversation with you. It's different to how I'd speak in a podcast.
Yep.
You have to like turn it on and off, and that's something that I'm learning to get better at. And there's a quote that has helped me so much, because as people know, public speaking is the most feared thing in the world. It's more feared than death. But I actually find it quite easy, and it's because of this quote that says, the act of confidence comes before the feeling of confidence. It's from a book called The Confidence Gap by Dr. Russ Harris. Fascinating book, and it just starts to talk about the psychology of confidence. And I'm like, wait, if I'm going to wait until I'm confident to get up and do this speech, I'm never going to do it. And then I'm also like, quite often, like, I'll book stuff in without even having like the fully prepared for it. But then I'm like, you know what, I can get up and act confident for this, or I can get up and be nervous, and of course it's going to go poorly. For example, yesterday I interviewed Jess Fox, paddler, canoeist, gold medalist in Tokyo, one of the best Australian athletes of all time, for Red Bull, live at a conference on stage with 350 people
and
watching.
You said at the time you've never done asking questions, you've never done an interview like that.
I mean, I've done 130 podcasts with guests, so I feel very confident interviewing people, but I've never done it in front of a live crowd.
Yep.
And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to own it and pretend I know what I'm doing. I threw in some jokes and I just acted like I knew what I was doing, and at the end I felt super confident because the act came before the feeling.
About that's winning, because who really knows?
Yeah.
No one really knows.
Yeah.
If you're confident and back what you do, then
They don't know.
they don't know.
They believe it. If like
Yeah.
if you
believe it,
then they believe it.
Like,
Exactly.
I've even had competitions where I've gotten up and training hasn't been great, but you just stick to the process. You know, try to, even though you don't feel really confident, you try to just do the best that you can, and you have a personal best. You go out, you win, you have a great day, and it's like I didn't even feel great,
Yeah.
but I just gave it a crack and it worked out.
Yeah, I got told something once again from Parton Lynch. I haven't mentioned him in a podcast ever, let alone twice in a podcast. But I remember he told me something one day. He was like, you're going to win at your best, and you're going to win at your worst, and you're going to lose at your best, and you're going to lose at your worst. Like, you're going to win when you're feeling your best, and then you're going to win when you're feeling your worst, and you're going to lose when you're feeling your absolute best, and you're going to lose when you're feeling your worst. So don't go into an event where you're like feeling flat. And how often do you like do well when you're injured because you have no expectation?
Or even you've had a terrible run into a competition and you're like, oh, well, just
Yeah,
gonna give
the
it my
dropping
best.
of
Or
the
you've had the best
expectation.
run. Like our recent World Championships, I had great training, feeling great, sleeping well, eating well, everything's going to plan. And I made one mistake on one dive that took me out of the final, making the final. And that's all it can take. Or you have a terrible run. You don't feel great. You've been a bit sick. The year before, I had like a mad sinus infection. I was like having these fevers. They gave me antibiotics. I felt better. I went out, top 10 in the world.
Crazy.
One of them had a better run than the other, but one of them performed better than the other as
That's
well.
what I mean. Like, you can have perfect preparation, poor performance, and you can have terrible preparation and perform well. So the reason I say that is that comes back for me is the act of confidence comes before the feeling. If you're like, oh my God, like this isn't going to be a good day. It's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to start telling myself, telling my body that it's going to be a good day. And then if it's not, so be it. It was probably going to be a bad day anyway if you went into it with a negative mindset. And if it comes out across well, then good on you.
Another one I like to think about when things are a little difficult is what if it works, and what if it turns out better than you thought? There's been times where things have literally turned out so much better than I thought. Like what I'm doing today isn't even 1/100th of what I dreamed of doing. I loved making videos as a kid, and I thought maybe I could get 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. I thought if I could do that, that'd be huge.
3 million.
You get up to, I think did we just hit 4 with Minchero?
No, I think you're on 3.9.
3.9.
4 million.
Like, it's just incredible. But then you don't even feel like you're on top of the world. It just feels like you're doing your daily
It doesn't change
steps,
anything, does it?
daily processes. Not much changes.
Is there another plaque for 10 million? I know.
There is. That's our next goal.
Is there a 10 million plaque?
Yeah, I've told Ramon if we can get 10 million, you can apply to get a second, I believe.
What do you mean?
Because he shoots.
Oh, you
a
can
lot
get
of my
2.
content. I
Okay.
think you can look after your team. So
if you get to 10 million. Jeez,
Yes.
There mustn't be too many 10 million subscriber channels.
That'd be incredible.
That's like a unicorn.
Even 100K, I held the plaque and I thought achieving this would be impossible, and I didn't think I could do that. And then you hold it and you thought, you know what?
A million.
I just had to find the way. Yeah. Just like
You're holding that and you're like,
Yeah.
I want the gold.
Then you get the gold and it's like, all right, for the diamond. But
Mate, it's so hard to build. I've like spent money on like filming such nice content and like really cool videos for YouTube. I
shorts
think
are-
I've got like 100 subscribers. It's just
shorts
like,
are the way.
I gave up.
Long form's a different game. I'm trying to figure it out at the moment.
It'll come.
But the podcast is definitely the space I wanted to jump into as well, because I've always been curious. Well, you always want to ask the questions, and in those moments where I've looked in the mirror and said, is this for me? Like, can I do this? And then you pull through. I wonder what the answer is for someone else.
What do you mean with
Those moments where you doubt yourself and you don't believe you can do it, or you're pushing really hard, because I find when you're pushing, you're not nailing everything all the time. For example, in training, the front 4.5, one of my hardest dives, I could do the 3.5 and nail it every day of the week. I could wake up at 1 a.m, turn up tired, and I could drill it. The 4.5, it requires like being in nearly a peak physical condition. I still find it really difficult. So I find if you're striving to be the best, you're constantly failing because you're doing things that are difficult.
Yeah.
And being able to get through things that are difficult is different for each person. So when I've found things most difficult, I've found strategies like writing down. what I want to do, how I'm going to get through it, how I'm feeling, and that's been really effective. Setting goals has been one of my most effective ways to get through it.
Yeah, I love the way that you just explained that if you're trying to achieve the epitome of anything, whatever industry you're in, you're of course going to fail, because to get to close to perfect, it requires thousands of failed attempts. Which, yeah, that's kind of how I look at now what I'm building with the Good Human Factory and with being a public speaker. Sure, I've had some growth and I've had a few wins on the board and worked with some good clients, but I look at it like it took me 15 years to get to the top 100 surfers in the world. It might take me 15 years to get to the top 100 public speakers in the world. I'm only about 4 years in and I'm starting to build some good clients. So it's like setting that goal of, hey, if I want to get to here, I can't expect to jump there in one go, because I'm not going to be ready anyway. Like, I'm not going to be ready to speak in front of 10,000 people at a conference right now. Actually, to be honest, I reckon I would be. But I wouldn't have been a year and a half ago, when I would have probably said yes to it a year and a half ago and I wouldn't have been ready, whereas now I would be. But yeah, I just think, I just like what you were saying there, of this idea of if you're striving to get to really near the top, you need to expect that there's going to come with a lot of failures and not be disheartened by them. Look at them as learnings. And that's what Stephen Bartlett, who does the podcast The Diary of a CEO, does better than anyone. He's like, just make so many micro mistakes and continue to improve on them. Always looking for those marginal gains, and that's how you're just going to get ahead in life.
So it's just like, just getting over it, just finding a way, go around it, get through it, jump over it.
Keep moving forward.
Like, just find a way, whatever that is.
Absolutely.
Especially when you fight different battles, like outside the pool, you face all kinds of challenges. Like even starting the podcast, getting graphic designers for what do I want the thumbnail to look like. I have got like a strategy. I want to put the short key videos up as well and have a different thumbnail for those. So you got to make like so many different choices and so many different things, and just being open to fail. Like another question I'd love to ask is, when you gave what you believed was the best talk. So when you gave what you believed was the best talk, when you went to do your second one after that, how did you not get stuck down by perfectionism, thinking that maybe you gave your best talk?
It's a hard one, because every audience is different. Like I said before, there's like obviously good and bad ones, but it kind of comes down to the audience more so when it comes to speaking. It's a hard one. Like, I can deliver the best talk I feel like I've ever done and it not hit because the audience isn't really in a place to want to receive it, because they're a corporate group that they've had their boss be like, hey guys, you got to come and do this at lunch, and they're all like, oh, I don't want to be here. But then I can give the best one I've ever done, and sure, it'll engage a few people. But then sometimes I've had ones where I've like, oh, I kind of missed a few of my best points, and people come up to me and be like, thank you so much, that was amazing. You get all this incredible feedback, and you're like, oh, I'm just harsh on myself. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's just like trying to focus on the average, not focusing on the best and the worst one. It's like, how do you continually bring the average up to a really high quality? Because there's going to be outliers where you have, like, I have weird days now where I like get up on stage and I don't really prepare anymore ever for my keynote, because I can do it off the back of my hand basically. But I sometimes will be standing on stage and have these weird like out of body experiences where I can feel myself talking and telling the story, but I'm like thinking about like, I wonder, far out, I still need to like post that thing today, but I'll be talking. It's so weird. But yeah, it doesn't really answer your question. But the whole best or worst thing is like, no, you just want to try and increase the average rather than be like, okay, how do I emulate the best one again? It's like, no, how do I just consistently bring out the best in myself?
Yeah. It's amazing how your brain gets really good at doing what it's used to. Even if we're training, I could be up on 10 meter about to send one of my dives, and you still have sometimes those distracting thoughts coming in. It's like, no, I don't care about whether I've done that. I got to focus on right here, right now, on this dive. But even that's like, I feel being in the moment, constant battle. Even when things are going well, sometimes
that's
it's a
sometimes the
battle.
hardest, when like things are going well, because you go, okay, how do I emulate it? And then you start thinking too much. It's like that flow state is such a fine line of like overthinking, underthinking, and like no thinking. It's it's a funny thing that we're all trying to chase as athletes.
An interesting thing for you as well, your sister with Fisher, you've had some incredible experiences overseas. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the Fisher thing's cool. I mean, Paul is what we call him, has been with my sister for like 12 years now. So he used to be a pro surfer. So I knew him as a pro surfer. He was kind of like a guy a few years, or like 8
That's
years
how you
older
guys
than-
met?
I hadn't met him until he started dating my sister. but I knew exactly who he was. He was a huge personality in the surf industry. So we were like, I met him before I saw him with my sister, because he was sponsored by Reef and I was sponsored by Reef at the time, and we're both in Hawaii, and I met him real quickly, and then he's like, I'm surprising your sister and going home next week. And he was like this like loose larrikin surfer, and everyone was like, oh, you wouldn't want him dating your sister. I mean, look at them now, they're the best couple ever. But yeah, it was interesting. So then it went into, he started getting out of his surfing and starting to DJ, and they were living in like a granny flat out the back of my like family friend's house up until like 5 years ago. And then his music just took off, and he went from Cut Snake to Fisher. He released Losing It, and his life changed, and it's been so cool to watch it. I mean, he's never changed as a person. I got to travel over to Europe this year and watch him on tour, which was pretty special. I mean, I went to Malta for 3 days, and then like flew on a private jet to Ibiza, and then flew on a private jet to Paris, and then a private jet to Wales, and a private jet to Manchester. So he's living this crazy life, but he's still doing it with the energy that he gives to every person. It's pretty spectacular the way he holds himself, if I'm being honest. The way that he will DJ in front of 50,000 people, but then he'll be turning around to all of our friends and family and still give everyone their energy and be like, what do you think of that? Did you have a good time? And he just brings so many people joy, and I love it, because somebody sent me a message when I was overseas in Europe with him this year, and replied to like one of my stories going like, wouldn't it be nice if he actually put some time and energy into like helping people with their mental health or something like you do? And for a second I wanted to bite back and give this person like a word, and I was like, he just doesn't see it. I'm like, he's making millions of people happy. What, like, it's no different to what I'm doing in my own way. Like, he's, you know what I mean? He's
doing
bringing
it his way.
Yeah, he's doing it his way. And like, not everyone has to be this person trying to be a squeaky clean profile of this and that. It's like, no, he brings joy because he's exactly himself, and I love that. So I think it's it's been really cool to watch his journey, watch my sister's journey with what she's been going through with infertility and building a huge podcast. And yeah, it's a pretty lucky, weird life that I get to live, that I'm like, not only have this surf and cool career of business building myself, but I've got this like unicorn brother-in-law and sister who are just like living the absolute extremes of fame and wealth in life as well, which is really cool to see.
When you've seen that, lived that, done that, and then you come back and doing your own stuff, some people might think, oh, I need to be doing this or that. How do you feel about all that going on?
I'm in my own lane. If I thought about that, it's like, once again, it's like external validation and like needing something to feel good about yourself. I joke about it sometimes, like, I have a podcast that does okay with downloads, but it's not even the best podcast in my family. Like, my sister has a huge podcast, Darling Shine. So it's like, if I'm trying to like compare against my sister and Fisher, like, I'm always going to be unhappy. Like, not everyone can have the success that they have, but so I can look at it and be like, it's inspiring to me. We're all like, it's amazing. They can help me with growing my stuff. I can support them wherever I can and just get to go on the journey with them. So there's zero jealousy. I just am so proud of them, to be honest. Like, they're doing such good things in the world, and bringing our family and a lot of people around them along the journey with them, which is beautiful. Yeah,
I love that. And being so in tune with your values, like, I've always, even as a friend, felt really supportive and looked after by yourself, always giving us good merch to rock every day. But mine's giving me a hard time. I've worn these like a few days this week, so
I'll send you down both.
Now I'm living by myself too. Like, I've actually got to wash them myself, so
I'll send you some more so you don't have to wash
okay,
them.
thank you. Yeah. Or the yellow ones, because I always wear suits. The yellow ones are a bit like,
they're a bit hectic.
Yeah. I'm sticking to the
black and white.
Yeah.
I'm actually almost out of them all, so I'm like, I need to reorder them, and they take a while. So
if anyone needs to get some socks,
get on there quickly.
The Good Human Factory.
Yeah,
I'll probably jump on and get some beforehand.
I'll send you some more. Don't worry.
Anything else you'd love to share with that audience? Anything we've missed about Cooper Chapman?
About Cooper Chapman. I mean, there's one thing I like to share on podcasts, my 1% Club. This is one of the things that I'm probably most proud of with the Good Human Factory. I came up with this concept a couple years ago. Like, I'd had my speaking, I had my podcast, I'd do the merch, but I felt like I wasn't building a community. There was people who were like an audience, but I didn't feel like it was a community. So I was like, okay, what can I do to give back to the community daily? And I was like doing a meditation one day, and I was like thinking in my head, surely we can all give 1% of our day to our mental health. Everyone listening right now, hopefully you're sitting there going, Yeah, you know what? 1% of our
What
day.
is 1% of the time?
1% of a day is 14 minutes, approximately. I think it's a few seconds over 14 minutes. So I was like, okay, sure, we can give 14 minutes of our day, a quarter of an hour, once a day for our mental health. So I was like, okay, what are 2 good things that are good for your mental health? And meditation, mindfulness are things that always come up. It's absolutely free, doesn't cost anything. You can sit there and close your eyes and sit with your thoughts. So I was like, okay, I want to do 10 minutes of meditation every morning, and I want to do 4 minutes of gratitude at night. Reflect on my day, think about a few of the things that went well for a couple minutes, write them down on my Instagram story. Great. And I was like...
I see you do that religiously, by the way.
Okay, so
Those
you probably don't
Instagram
even know the
stories.
rest of it. So this is where it started. 860 days ago, this idea came, okay, I want to give 1% of my day to my mental health. And I was like, how can I engage the community and help them with theirs too? Because I know you're like 8 times more likely to maintain a healthy habit if you have an accountability group around you. It's like, how much easier is it to go to the gym when you've got a partner to go to the gym with you? A lot easier.
Especially with our coaches.
Exactly.
I found over COVID, and we didn't have the accountability coaches, like really difficult.
So I was like, okay, what about if I start an Instagram group chat, and every morning at 7 a.m. I'll send a 10-minute guided meditation YouTube link that you can just click on and do it. And every night I'll put on my Instagram story 3 things I'm grateful for, and then I'll send it to the group chat. So that started 860 days ago.
Wow.
With 30 people in one group chat. Now there's 1,800 people in 9 different group chats, about 150 in each group chat from all around the world. I haven't missed a day in 2.5 years where I've sent a meditation in the morning and I put the gratitudes on my story and send it to the group. And then they all write in their group chat 3 things they're grateful for from their day. There's been, I think, 750,000 gratitudes written in over the past 800 days. Well, think about it. There's 1,000 people that do 3 a day. There's 3,000 a day some days. Quite often, there's usually about 200 that'll fill in. So about 600 a day gratitudes get written in. And I've done it for 850 days. So yeah, I counted for a while and then I was just like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, it's just a free community that every day I do, set in a meditation, write 3 gratitudes at night. And it's just a resource for people to be like, you know what? I want to do one little thing each day for my mental health. Join the 1% Club. It's free. All you have to do is send @TheGoodHumanFactory on Instagram a DM and say, I want to join the club. You can mute the notifications and never actually write anything, but you can just read other people's gratitudes and it makes you feel good. I'll add you into a group after this and you'll see what I mean.
I'd love to.
It's just really cool reading other people's.
Yeah, I was going to say, even checking out someone else's, like what made their day.
Yeah, and you go, oh wow, I'm complaining about my day. And sometimes people go, I had a really hard day today. I've lost my uncle and really struggling. I lost my job. And then you see like all these strangers from around the world going, oh, I'm so sorry to hear. If there's anything I can do, send me a DM. Like I'm here for you. And these communities of people, of good humans, have just started supporting each other through their tough times, through their good times. Someone's like, oh, I got married. And then you have 30 people go, congratulations, send a photo, good on you. It's created all these little communities of people just trying to support each other to take a little better care of their mental health. So there you go, there's my one last little thing I'll add. If you want to join it, just go send us a message and you'll get added in. It's free, and yeah, it's a really nice place to be part of a community of people that are trying to be good humans.
You have to put me in one of those.
I will, I'll put you in one straight after this.
I'd love to join one.
Yeah.
Well, Cooper, thank you so much for coming on. I find it, again, someone that I know well, but just diving deeper into who you are, what you do, and being curious about that, I really enjoy as a person. I hope that you guys listening at home can find value from that as well. And I really appreciate your time. Look forward to joining the 1% Club, and I'm sure we'll have you back on Diving Deep with Sam Fricker very soon.
Mate, I can't wait. Thank you so much. It's been a fun interview. I haven't done line of questioning like this ever, so I feel like we went in some fun little tangents. It's always nice to get to come and spend some time with you, and yeah, I'm excited to watch and support your podcast and get you back on mine and talk about hopefully a gold medal around the neck at Paris. So yeah, thanks for having me on, mate.
Always a pleasure.
Love ya.
Oh man.